Late night shadows on the wall, smoke is dancing through the hall. Neon whispers call my name. Every night it feels the same. One more glass before goodbye, one more song before the sky turns from blue to morning gray. Please don't take this night away. It starts again. One more glass before goodbye, one more song before the sky. Let the tubes keep glowing bright. Hold this fading jazz-filled night. The bartender knows the tune. Clock keeps running much too soon. Outside trains begin to roll. Inside music saves the soul. One more glass before goodbye, one more song before the sky. Let the vinyl spin once more, like it did the night before. The bartender turned off the lights, but nobody moved tonight. The glasses stayed upon the bar like little memories in the dark. Outside the city rushed away, inside the jazz refused to fade. A trumpet sighed across the room like midnight flowers in full bloom. Stay a little longer, stay until the dawn. The record keeps on spinning long after hope is gone. The bartender turned off the lights, yet the music held on tight. The tubes were glowing soft and gold, keeping warm the stories told. A lonely businessman sat still, holding dreams he couldn't fill. A couple laughed and shared a drink, standing on the evening's brink. The piano knew the things we hid, the bass remembered what we did. Brushes danced upon the snare like whispers floating through the air. Stay a little longer, stay until the dawn. The record keeps on spinning long is gone. The shadows stretched across the floor as if they'd been there years before. The trumpet climbed the smoky sky, refusing one last goodbye. The room became a world apart, built from rhythm, wood, and heart. The bartender turned off the lights, yet nobody forgot tonight. The music lingered in the air like an unfinished midnight prayer. Stay a little longer, stay until the dawn. The record keeps on spinning long after hope is gone. The final note began to fade, still no one seemed to walk away, because somewhere between the sound a little piece of us was found. The bartender turned off the lights, but the tubes kept shining bright, and in that warm amber glow, we became the song we know. Nobody wanted to go home yet. The night was still too young to forget. Outside the taxis passed in lines. Inside we lost all sense of time. The jukebox played a worn-out tune, a smoky sax beneath the moon. The bartender cleaned another glass and watched another hour pass. Nobody wanted to go home yet. There were still stories left unsaid. The tubes were glowing amber bright, holding together the fragile night. A businessman loosened his tie, an old man stared with quiet eyes. A woman smiled into her drink, lost somewhere between thought and ink. The piano rolled like gentle rain, the trumpet carried hidden pain. The bass kept walking nice and slow, giving the room a softer glow. Nobody wanted to go home yet. There were still stories left unsaid. The tubes were glowing amber bright, holding together the fragile night. Another round was quietly poured. Nobody seemed to keep the score. The city outside raced ahead, but here the world moved slow instead. The drummer brushed the snare with grace. The melody filled every space. A simple phrase, a simple line that stayed inside the heart and mind. Nobody wanted to go home yet. The last train wasn't important yet. The record spun like they always do, turning old memories into something new. The saxophone began to climb, floating above the hands of time. The room grew smaller, warm and near, as if the music brought us here. together the fragile night. When morning slowly touched the sky, nobody hurried to say goodbye, because for one more song we found a place where lost souls gathered round. Nobody wanted to go home yet, and maybe that was happiness.
One last bottle for the road before the morning starts to show. The city waits beyond the door, but nobody is leaving anymore. The amber lights are growing low, the records turn a little slow. The bartender gives a knowing smile and lets the music stay a while. One last bottle for the road, one last story left untold, one last song before we go, one last bottle for the road. The trumpet sings a smoky line, the piano gently marks the time. The bass keeps walking through the dark like a train running through the heart. A stranger laughs from down the bar. Someone points to an old scar. For just a moment, everyone feels like they belong to someone. One last bottle for the road, one last story left untold, one last song before we go, one last bottle for the road. The tubes are glowing soft and warm, protecting us from coming dawn. The wooden walls and whiskey air hold 1,000 memories there. The drummer paints with brush and wire, the saxophone climbs even higher. A melody we all can know, though nobody heard it long ago. One last bottle for the road, one last story left untold, one last song before we go, one last bottle for the road. Outside, the first train starts to run. The night surrenders to the sun, yet no one seems prepared to leave this little world we still believe. The final chorus fills the room, chasing away the coming gloom. And in that golden tube-lit glow, we raise our glasses. One more toast, one last bottle for the road, one last story left untold, one last song before remember this someday. Not the drinks or smoke we knew, but the songs that carried us through. The saxophone stayed until sunrise, long after the last goodbye, long after the glasses were cleared, long after the room grew quiet. The city was turning silver, morning touching every sign. But inside this little jazz bar, the night was still alive. The saxophone stayed until sunrise, singing low and singing high, like it knew every secret people tried so hard to hide. The bartender folded napkins, chairs were resting on the floor, yet the melody kept drifting, like a guest who wanted more. A lonely clock upon the wall counted every passing minute, but nobody seemed to notice the music had us living in it. The saxophone stayed until sunrise, warm as amber, soft as wine, every note a fading photograph, every phrase a frozen time. The trumpet answered from the shadows, the piano gently cleared the way. The bass kept walking through the darkness, leading night into the day. Somewhere a train began its journey, somewhere people woke for work, but here the world stood still together inside this glowing wooden church. The saxophone stayed until sunrise, refusing one last farewell, holding on to every heartbeat under its familiar spell. The tubes glowed like tiny lanterns, golden in the morning haze, casting light upon the stories that survived 1,000 days. One more chorus, one more melody, one more memory before the sun. One more chorus, one more melody, one more night before we're done. The drummer brushed away the silence, the trumpet floated through the air, the piano wrapped the room in comfort, like a well-worn evening prayer. The saxophone climbed even higher, then settled softly with grace, leaving traces in the darkness that time could never erase. The saxophone stayed until sunrise,
when the final note was gone, nobody spoke for several moments, because the night had carried on. Then the morning filled the windows, the spell slowly disappeared, but somewhere deep inside our hearts, that melody remained for years. The saxophone stayed until sunrise, the tube still glowing cold, and every soul inside that bar left with a story to be told.
Nobody remembered the time. The hands kept moving, but nobody minded. The clock above the bottles had been ticking all night long, yet somewhere between the saxophone and the piano's quiet song, we forgot what time was for. Nobody remembered the time, not the man by the window, not the woman with the cigarette, not the bartender polishing glasses under the amber light. The tubes glowed softly like tiny suns in the dark, casting golden reflections across old wood and empty seats. A tenor sax drifted slowly through the room like smoke, each note carrying memories nobody planned to remember. Nobody remembered the time, because the night had become something larger than hours, something warmer than minutes. The bass kept walking, patient and steady. The drummer brushed away silence without saying a word. Outside, the city changed. The darkness became blue, the blue became silver, the silver became morning. Still the music remained. Nobody remembered the time when the trumpet began to sing a lonely melody, floating somewhere above reality. For a moment, everyone looked younger, as if the years had stepped outside and left their coats by the door. One more chorus, one more glass, one more story. One more chorus, one more laugh, one more memory. The record continued spinning, the tubes continued glowing, the room continued
this moment mattered. The saxophone rose higher than it had all night, then slowly descended like the last light before dawn. The piano answered gently, the trumpet whispered goodbye, the bass took one final walk across the sleeping room. Nobody remembered the time, but everyone remembered how this night felt. Years from now, the names may disappear, the faces may fade, yet somewhere in a forgotten corner of memory, a warm saxophone, a glowing tube amplifier, and a quiet jazz bar will still be playing long after the night is gone.
The last train had already gone. Nobody hurried anymore. The station lights were far away, beyond the sleeping city doors. A neon sign blinked softly outside the quiet street, while inside the jazz bar, the night and morning chose to meet. The last train had already gone, and strangely that felt right. No schedules left to follow, no reason left to fight. The bartender poured another drink without a single word. The saxophone filled the silence with feelings never heard. A trumpet answered from afar, like moonlight on a river. Two voices drifting through the room, making tired hearts shiver. The last train had already gone. The clocks became meaningless. The world outside kept moving, but here we asked for less. A businessman removed his watch and placed it on the bar. A traveler unfolded old photographs of places near and far. Someone laughed, someone sighed, someone quietly closed their eyes. The tubes glowed warm and golden against the fading night, holding every memory together inside their gentle light. The last train had already gone, yet nobody felt alone. The music built a little home for hearts that couldn't go home. The bass kept walking patiently, the drummer brushed the air. The piano wrapped around us like an old familiar prayer. One more chorus, one more melody, one more glass before
yet nobody seemed to care, because for a few beautiful hours we found exactly what was there.
A song left behind in the ashtray, beside a cigarette that never burned away. The room was quieter than before, yet the music lingered near the door. The glasses stood like empty dreams, reflecting soft amber beams. The bartender wiped the counter slow, as if he didn't want the night to go. A song left behind in the ashtray, a melody nobody could throw away. It floated gently through the air, like a memory still sitting there. The saxophone spoke in whispers now, no need for loud applause somehow. The trumpet answered from afar, like fading headlights of a passing car. Outside the morning slowly grew, painting the streets in silver blue. But inside the tubes kept glowing gold, protecting stories left untold. A song left behind in the ashtray, the kind that chooses to stay long after conversations end, long after strangers become friends. Bass moves softly through the room, like footsteps in familiar gloom. The piano scattered little stars across forgotten wooden bars. One more melody, one more refrain, one more chance to remember again. Before the sunlight calls our names. The smoke had vanished long ago, yet somehow it still seemed to flow inside the notes and gentle chords, inside the spaces between words. A traveler folded up a map, a businessman adjusted his hat. Someone quietly paid the bill, yet nobody really wanted to leave still. A song left behind in the ashtray, the last companion of the fading day. The tubes hum softly in the dark, keeping alive one final spark. The saxophone climbed one final hill, then slowly settled calm and still. The trumpet whispered one goodbye to the disappearing night sky. A song left behind in the ashtray, a melody destined to stay, not on the records or the wall,
Nobody left exactly the same, because a simple song had found a way to remain after the night slipped away. Slipped away.
When the neon finally went dark, the city lost its painted stars. The colors faded from the street, and silence settled soft and deep. The windows held the morning light where once they held the night. The shadows that had danced for hours slowly disappeared from sight. When the neon finally went dark, the saxophone still played a melody too beautiful to simply fade away. The bartender stood quietly, looking toward the door, as if he knew this fragile night would never come once more. The piano spoke in gentle chords, like footsteps in the rain. The trumpet carried distant dreams across the sleeping lane. When the neon finally went dark, nobody seemed afraid, because the music filled the room where loneliness once stayed. The bass continued walking slow through memories and smoke. The drummer brushed away the dark with every tender stroke. A couple gathered up their coats, a traveler checked the time. Finished one last drink as the sky began to shine. When the neon finally went dark, the tube still glowed inside. Small golden suns against the dawn, refusing yet to hide. One more chorus, one more song, gives way. The saxophone rose one final time above the waking town, then gently drifted through the room like feathers falling down. The piano answered quietly, the trumpet softly sighed, the
The bass and drum stood faithfully right by their side. When the neon finally went dark, the room became a dream, a place that only music knew, or maybe so it seemed. The final melody remained, floating through the air, touching every wooden chair, every memory resting there. When the neon finally went dark, the night was almost through, but everyone who heard that song knew something had come true. The neon disappeared, the morning took its place, yet somewhere in our hearts that music still remained. When the neon finally went dark, the story wasn't done, because every ending leaves behind the beginning of another one. The tubes kept glowing after goodbye, long after the last chair was pushed inside, long after the glasses had been cleared, and the final footsteps disappeared. Morning rested softly on the floor. Sunlight reached the old wooden door. The city had already begun its day, but inside a piece of night remained. The tubes kept glowing after goodbye, small golden embers against the light, holding every song that filled the room, keeping memories alive in the quiet gloom. The saxophone rested in its case, the trumpet slept in its place, the piano stood silent for the first time, yet somehow the music survived. Every laugh, every sigh, every glass raised toward the sky, every lonely heart, every hopeful dream still lingered in the morning beams. The tubes kept glowing after goodbye, as though they refused to say farewell, as though they understood what words could never tell. The bartender stood alone, looking across the empty room, not feeling sadness, not feeling joy, only gratitude. Gratitude for the songs, gratitude for the night, gratitude for the strangers who became part of the bass no longer walked, the drums no longer swayed, yet echoes of their rhythm still gently remained. The room felt larger now, yet somehow warmer too, because every note had left behind something honest and true. The tubes kept glowing after goodbye, their amber lights soft and slow, like the final page of a novel nobody wanted to close. Outside the trains were running, outside the crowds returned, outside another ordinary day was waiting to begin. But inside this tiny jazz bar, time moved differently. Time belonged to melodies, time belonged to memories, time belonged to the warmth only music can leave behind. One more chorus, one more refrain, one more memory before we part. One more chorus, one more refrain, one more song inside the heart. The sunlight grew a little brighter, the shadows slowly disappeared. The night finally released its hold and yielded to the day. Yet the tubes kept glowing, as if protecting the final moments of something beautiful. The saxophone's last melody still floated through imagination. The trumpet's final answer still echoed in the mind. The piano's gentle harmony still rested on the wooden walls. Nothing was playing, yet everything remained. The tubes kept glowing after goodbye, after the laughter, after the whiskey, after the stories, after the music. Because some nights never truly end, they simply become memories, and memories become songs, and songs become places we return to when life grows heavy. The tubes kept glowing after goodbye, their golden light finally fading into the brightness of morning. And as the room became silent, one final feeling remained. Thank you for staying, thank you for listening, thank you for the night. The tubes kept glowing after goodbye, and somewhere far beyond the morning, the music continued.